Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be covering what I like to call green piercers, or more commonly referred to as green RustTyranomon. The whole core idea of the deck is to attack into the opponent's Digimon and deal piercing damage, which also means that you'll be getting a security check on top of potentially killing the opponent's Digimon. That's just a pretty powerful strategy overall, and the deck is definitely a lot of fun to play. So, starting with the Digitama, I'm going to be running 4 Tanemon because Tanemon is a pretty decent Digitama. The plus 1000 buff can matter in a lot of cases, and we are going to be Digivolving quite a lot. So it's not necessarily hard to get that plus 1000 buff, so that just makes Tanemon one of the better Digitama to use for green. Now, my sub-Digitama I'm going to be running is 1 copy of Argomon, because Argomon is just a also very efficient card because he allows you to get some memory during your active phase. So that's just a pretty solid ability because, again, we are going to be Digivolving a lot. Trying to conserve on memory so that way we can make our plays more efficient and powerful is never a bad thing. Next, on to the rookies. I'm running 3 copies of Tentomon. So Tentomon is just a very solid rookie. He gives the inheritable skill of when the Digimon's attacking, you could rest one of your opponent's Digimon with 3000 or less DP. So the whole idea, again, behind resting the opponent's stuff is so that way you could attack into it, and then ideally you'll have piercing damage to just deal damage to the opponent while killing their thing. So he just works very, very well with that overall strategy. Next, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Palmon. So Palmon is a pretty decent Digimon. You could Digivolve into her, but her when played effect is pretty relevant because you get to reveal the top 3 cards of your deck and add a level 4 Digimon among them into your hand and the rest on the bottom. So she's really there just to help you find your level 4s, so that way you could try to get into your Megas as quickly as possible. Next, I'm running 3 copies of Argomon. So Argomon is just your classic value rookie, where he's just very efficient to play, he's very efficient to evolve into, he's just the value rookie. And then lastly, I'm running 4 copies of Agumon, because Agumon is just a fairly standard Digimon to Digivolve with, because he gives the inheritable ability of during your turn, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP, and if the whole idea is for us to attack into our opponent's Digimon, then we want to make sure that ours are going to be stronger than theirs. Next, on to the champions. So I'm going to be running 4 copies of Woodmon because he is just the blocker of the deck. I'm going to be running 4 copies of Kabuterimon because he gives the great inheritable ability of during your turn, every one of your opponent's rested Digimon, this Digimon gets plus 1000 DP. Continuing that bit of a DP buff idea, so that way we could obviously rest the opponent's Digimon, attack into him, piercing, all that good stuff. On top of which, he's just really efficient to Digivolve into because he only costs 1 to Digivolve into. And then lastly, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tyranomon. So he's just a card for the Tyranomon line, and he has a pretty good when Digivolved effect, where you get to check the top 3 cards, add 1 level 5 and 1 green tamer among them into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom. This is pretty effective at, again, trying to find your evolutions, so that way you could get to your Megas as quickly and efficiently as possible. On top of which, he's also digging for a green tamer, which is very, very important because we need to see a green tamer in order for our RustTyranomon to get half of its abilities. Next, on to the ultimates. I'm running 3 copies of Okuwamon. So Okuwamon is just a pretty good ultimate because he has the inheritable ability for your Megas, where if this Digimon destroys an opponent's Digimon by battle, you get plus 1 memory. So again, that's just reinforcing the whole idea of trying to attack into your opponent's Digimon, and this card is rewarding you for that type of playstyle. Next, I'm running 2 copies of Jagamon. So Jagamon is pretty good because he has a win attacking ability where you get to check the top 3, and then you could Digivolve into a level 6 among them without paying its cost, and then the rest go on the bottom. So he has the potential to instantly go into your megas if one of your megas is on the top 3, but outside of that, he's just a fairly okay ultimate to run. But again, the whole idea is to try to get into our megas as fast as possible, and the fact that he could potentially just be a mega on attack is very, very solid. And then the last ultimate of the deck is going to be Metal Tyrannomon. So again, he's part of the Tyrannomon line, which is pretty important for the deck. And then he also has the great inheritable ability where during your turn, if this Digimon destroys an opponent's level 6 or greater Digimon by battle, he becomes active. Again, he's just there to reinforce the idea of attacking into the opponent's Digimon and getting rewarded for it. And having a green Digimon become active is very, very powerful because that means we could attack again and potentially kill off another Digimon or deal some more damage to the opponent. As far as the megas go, I'm running 3 copies of GranKuwagamon because he has piercing, and he also gets a plus 4,000 DP when it's your turn. So that means he is a 15,000 on base without really doing anything, on top of which he has piercing. So again, him attacking into the opponent's rested Digimon is the most ideal way that he wants to engage with the opponent. And then the last mega is 3 copies of RustTyranomon. So RustTyranomon is the end of the green Tyrannomon line, and he's pretty good because he just does a lot. So during your turn, if you have a green tamer, this card can attack the opponent's active Digimon, which is a pretty big deal because it allows him to basically attack anything he wants. And then he also has an additional ability of during your turn, if your opponent's Digimon was destroyed by battle, by this Digimon, you get to rest one of your opponent's Digimon. So he could potentially rest other Digimon to attack into, or depending on what the setup, just take out a blocker in case you want to have some of your smaller Digimon get through. So he's just a very, very powerful and very, very versatile card with his ability, and built up correctly, he could be an absolute monster to try to deal with. Now on to the options. So the deck is a little option light, and that's not necessarily a problem. I am choosing to run 3 copies of Flower Cannon because Flower Cannon is just a very cheap and efficient option. All it does is rest one of your opponent's Digimon, and then it has a security effect where it rests all your opponent's Digimon without blocker. Obviously, the whole goal is to try to attack into the opponent's Digimon, and you can only do that by resting them. In case you don't get to RustTyranomon and you get to GranKuwagamon, having Flower Cannon to still rest something down is very, very powerful because it's basically the equivalent of removal for this deck. And then obviously the security effect is pretty good because it also acts as a bit of defense, where if they hit it and it triggers, then the rest of their attackers will probably end up getting rested. And then going into our turn, their board is rested, so we could start swinging into their Digimon for, piercing damage and all that. And then the last option card of the deck I'm choosing to run is 3 copies of Terror's Cluster. So Terror's Cluster is a very, very powerful removal card where you get to return one of your opponent's rested Digimon to the bottom of the deck, then discard all of the Digivolution sources. So that's just really, really powerful because it can help deal with potential problems that you might not be able to deal with. Yes, the Digimon has to be rested, but being able to rest a Digimon in this deck isn't necessarily the hardest thing in the world, especially if you pair it up with like Flower Cannon or you pair it up with RustTyraноmon's attack. So it's not the hardest thing in the world to pull off, on top of which its security effect is still very, very strong, where you get to activate its main effect from the security when it's checked. This is very good because it could remove the most powerful Digimon that just attacked, and again, removal is really, really important. As far as tamers go, I'm running 1 copy of Izzy. So Izzy has a pretty solid main effect where if you have a level 5 or higher green Digimon, you could rest this card and basically check the top card of your deck. If it's a Digimon, add it to your hand, otherwise put it on the bottom. So obviously this is kind of why we're running a little bit of option light, and we're running just a solid amount of tamers that we feel like we need just to see it. So most of the time we're going to end up hitting some Digimon, so this is basically a really solid way of drawing an extra card every turn. And then it has the same security effect as all of the other tamers, where you could play it without paying its cost when it's checked. Next, I'm running 3 copies of Mimi. Mimi is really important because she has the ability to fix your memory, where if you have less than 2 memory, it becomes 3. And then she also has a very, very powerful main ability, where if you have a level 5 or higher green Digimon, you could rest this card and hatch a Digi-Egg or move a level 3 or higher from your raising area to the battle area. This is really good because it helps speed up the amount of more powerful Digimon you could have on the board, on top of which, again, fixing the memory is really important, and then she also has the same security effect as basically all the tamers in the game, currently. And then the last tamer I am running is 2 copies of Taiga. So Taiga is the key card to RustTyranomon in the Tyranomon line, because during your turn, your Digimon that contain Tyranomon get piercing, so that's how we give RustTyranomon piercing. On top of which, he has another ability where during your turn, if you would Digivolve into a Digimon whose name contains Tyranomon, its Digivolution is reduced by 1. So he is potentially saving us a lot of memory by Digivolving into our Tyranomons. And then again, security effect is the same, but the fact that he makes our Tyranomons cheaper to play and he gives our Tyranomons piercing is the key reasons why that he is played. So that is it for the main deck, and there are a couple of different other ways you could potentially build the deck. So you could splash in some red, because red also has some Tyranomons, so you could take advantage of Taiga a little bit more if you want to play more Tyranomons. You could play the red Agumon that allows you to look at the top 5 and add a tamer card into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. This is pretty good because we need to see our tamers. On top of which, he's a when played, so in our mostly green deck, we don't necessarily need to Digivolve into him, so that's a pretty good upside. The red Tyranomon you could also play because he has jamming. Dark Tyranomon you could play because he is a cheap and efficient card to Digivolve your red cards into. On top of which, he is still a Tyranomon, so he still gets that piercing and all that other good stuff. You could play the red Metal Tyranomon because he has some pretty high DP, on top of which he is very efficient to Digivolve into, especially off of the other Tyranomons. And with Taiga, he gets piercing, so he's still a pretty decent card to have overall. You could run Breakdramon because Breakdramon also has piercing, so he's just another mega that if you want to go into, if you're splashing red, then he's just pretty solid, because, again, piercing is very, very powerful, especially in combination with green, so you could rest their stuff down, attack into it, piercing. You could play the starter deck Tai, because he will just, during your turn, give all of your Digimon plus 1000 DP, so it makes your Digimon even stronger and harder to deal with. Since we're already splashing red, you could run Volcanodramon to basically just board wipe all of your opponent's Digimon with 4000 or less DP, so if you're afraid of Rookie Rush and you're splashing in red, Volcanodramon is a great tech card to use. Speaking of other great tech cards you could use, Terraforce is a really, really strong removal where you just destroy one of your opponent's Digimon, and then its security effect is you could use its main effect. It's just a very, very powerful removal option. In terms of other green cards you could run Cherry Blast if you want to run a little bit more options. Cherry Blast basically just rests the entire board. It doesn't exactly rest the entire board, but for the most part it does. It rests all the opponent's Digimon with 6000 or less DP, and then it has the security effect of activating its main effect. So it's just another way to rest cards very efficiently. You could also run Forbidden Temptation, because this is a very solid defensive card where one of your opponent's Digimon can't attack or block until the end of the opponent's turn. You could use this to help bypass some blockers. If you're afraid of a Digimon attacking into you or attacking at all, you could use this to stop their attack. It's just a very solid card. And then its security effect is also pretty powerful, where on your opponent's next active phase, all of your opponent's Digimon can't be made active. If they start attacking into you and this flips, then all of their Digimon are rested, and then you could go and attack into them. So it's just a overall very strong option. You could also run Lilymon, because Lilymon also has a great inheritable ability where when you are attacking, you could rest one of your opponent's Digimon without blocker. pair this up with a couple of other different cards, and the synergy can be pretty strong and pretty devastating for the opponent. You could also run Okuwamon. So Okuwamon is a very, very strong rookie. He does have an evolution cost where we want to try to save a lot on our evolution costs, but if we're saving memory, then sometimes we could afford to play him. But he gives the inheritable ability of if this Digimon is level 6 or more, it gets security attack +1. Imagine a RustTyranomon with Taiga on the field to give it piercing, attacking into your opponent's Digimon with security attack +1. That's just a very, very dangerous combination for the opponent because one Digimon means that they are losing 2 security, and because our stuff is usually going to be very, very big, we're most likely going to end up winning a lot of security checks. He's just a very solid rookie option that you could run on top of a whole bunch of other rookies that you could play, like some more vanillas just for efficiency, and so on and so forth. So that is it for my version of Green RustTyranomon. I've been having a little bit of good success with it. If things go really, really right, then the deck just steamrolls over the opponent. I just attack into all of their Digimon, making it very, very hard for them to play the game. Especially if I'm already ahead, then it makes it very hard for them to come back. It definitely has a lot of potential other synergies with other colors. As I mentioned, red is a very strong color. You could splash in some yellow for some healing. Like, there's just a whole bunch of other different things that you could do with the deck, and it definitely has a lot of power and a lot of potential with it. That's all I have for this video. As always, tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video.